Okay. Good morning, Tim Hill. This is Frank Cordero. I'm actually helping Ken Norman this month while he's away with his wife, taking care of their newborn baby. I just wanted to say thank you for letting me have the opportunity to contribute some critiques to the work that you've been doing in the character side. I teach model creation here at the campus, but also um, have a character background as well. And uh, when Ken was going away, he basically asked me to help and with some critiques. And so I'm making some videos here to help you guys with your work. So I see that you're in PFP online, and it basically is kind of like the sculpts to prep for your assets that you're going to be actually taking on for the next 3 months. So the good thing about that is that you get a sort of a first pass to prep for what you're making. Just to get to it, overall, I mean, I see some things that are showing that are that you're starting to progress and you're starting to do things. I'm glad that you're the anatomy from how the necks look here compared to things like this is improving a little bit, but there's still some more work on the anatomy front that I think is going to be important for you to develop. One of the things that I noticed right away was that your relationship of facial width is going to be interesting. It's really apparent in this image here. You've got the concept of the back of the head being the widest part of the overall head. The part that you haven't gotten, and it's shown up in both this sculpt and in this sculpt, although this sculpt seems to be a little better on that front actually. But this one is suffering from not enough of the bone, the cheekbone, coming out here. It's considered to be the widest part of the face. And right now, your dynamic, it's actually the reverse, where the jaw is the widest part of the face. And while it might work for a caricature or a cartoony character, one thing I'm going to challenge you is that if you were in fact trying to match this image, or at least try to do this, notice that in both cases, the width of the head, or the width of the these cheekbones, are the widest part of the face, and there's a little bit of gentle taper coming down. And then you also have this slight sort of angle in of the forehead. It's actually narrower than the back of the head, and that dynamic also needs to be present. So I just wanted to kind of point it out because structurally I think you still have some room to improve on the planes of the face and how they relate to each other. So these are the things that you need to look at. One of the best ways to kind of think about the face in terms of structure. All right, and by the way, this is I don't know if this is the artist or the actor that you were looking at, Ian McShane, but if he winds up being the actor that was the inspiration for this illustration, then definitely go with something where there's a lot of visual reference about this character. And even as wide as his face is, notice that the cheeks are almost always wider than the jaw. From these angles. Same thing here. Cheeks wider than the jaw. And you need enough reference to be able to kind of confirm what you're doing. I think that's the other challenge, is that when you're modeling from just one piece of reference, especially when you're casting a character, it gets a little bit difficult to be sure in what your efforts are doing. However, I find that you always go back to the one image that winds up being sort of the defining image. So while these other sources of reference can help you with other parts of the face, usually wind up picking, the one that defines the sculpt that you're doing. All right, and again, just some tips there. Now, I was gonna bring up, the artist that I like to look at when it comes to, might have heard him. He's a guy named Bridgman. Let me go ahead and I think it's George Bridgman. Anyway, head. George Bridgman was a famous instructor and did a lot of books of drawing and anatomy. Not everyone likes his style, you know, in terms of the thinking and the approach, but one of the things that he was really, really good at is kind of talking about the dynamics of face. And this is a really good image of how he talks a little bit about the structure, like the overall structure of the head. And then if you notice, as he divides down, you start going into it and you start getting this interior structuring of the face. Notice how the planes here and here taper in on the forehead, and the cheeks wind up being the widest part of the face, and then there's a taper down to the jaw, and then the back part of the jaw and the back part of the head, that winds up being that dynamic there. So these are the subtle plane changes that I think become important for you to look at. That's one way of looking at it. Then he has other drawings that, you know, you can look at it from an anatomical approach with the skeleton. Again, I think this is something that's really important for artists to kind of have when they're approaching structure while they're sculpting. And Bridgman was really good at kind of getting artists to kind of look at that kind of structure. And again, if you want to look at his stuff and look, you know, there's a lot of things online. There's also many, many books out there. He's just one of many sources of inspiration when it comes to this way of thinking. And I try to apply that to my own sculpts so that this way I don't lose structure or volume in the places that are needed in the face. So that is the main takeaway I want you to have, is I think that you have an opportunity as you go into PCC to make these corrections so that they can improve the overall quality of your sculpts. So again, the other thing I would say is I think you could have gone a little bit further with your frog. I feel like it's still, to this point, a little bit unfinished. These feet are definitely, I think for the time frames that you're given over the month, I think you need to go further. You know, I don't know what your hours and the commitment of time that you're putting in. Most inexperienced sculptors don't put in enough time at all. And probably you're saying, well, you don't know my life and my obligations. I'm telling you that if you want to pursue this, it is one of the most competitive businesses when it comes to this particular skill set. If you're going in the direction of characters, there are many, many people who do this at a very, very high level. And you have to be able to perform at a level where you're willing and able to take a job. And so how you get there is going to be a lot of practice, a lot of volume. If you did one sculpt of a frog, I would do 5 of them. All right, 5 of them quickly, or 5 of them, and get through it so I can really understand what I'm doing. You know, spending all this time on just one sculpt, and it's only at this level of finish, you know, I think you need to kind of change your concept of time and change your concept of production so that you can actually be in a better place with this. It's not necessarily how much time you have, it's how fast you think in the time and how you're starting to put your observations together into how they translate into your sculpts. So that's some of the things that I want you to think about moving forward as you get into PCC. You're also going to need to start thinking about topology and reference for topology. So definitely consider that as an option as well. And what do I mean by looking at topology? Well, I mean, let me go to another Pinterest window. Let's see. I'm going to go to mine. I have a couple of boards. Let's see. Do I have anything? Just do a search. CG character topology. Yeah, this is just a few different pages. And we're talking about this part, making your stuff production ready. That's going to be the next stage. But this stage isn't important if your sculpts are not good enough. I mean, here's an idea of a really strong sculpt. This is amazing. And again, this is unbelievable sculpting. But he's got all the things working in the right places when it comes to structure and all these other things. And this is the other thing. Look at great people who are doing this awesome. All right? for sure, definitely take a look at what people are doing who are better than you so that you can actually learn from them, because they'll show you how it's done. Anyway, this is just one example of many ways you can kind of find stuff that becomes useful to building a reference catalog of great examples. And I think that's going to become important to you. Anyway, so that's it. That's all I have to say about your work. I mean, I think, again, the main issue here is, really work on structure and your proportions within the face. Definitely in the areas of the cheekbones and the spacing of the eyes. The spacing is a little tight here as well. We want to make sure that you're watching for all those proportions. Usually the spacing between the eyes is about one eye width, and that could be, when you're talking about it, this length of the eye. So you might have to work on a spacing issue in general there too. So don't be afraid to kind of move things around. I would go to your lower res version of the sculpt, use the move brush, and then redistribute those volumes so that you have a better outcome. And you can make those changes pretty quickly if you have your lower subdivision levels around, just to see. And then you might have to do some minor resculpting to get those back in place. But anyway, that's all I got to say about your stuff. Good luck as you enter PCC 1, 2, and 3.